Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Be Healed Webshow, where we are just discussing our journey, whether in healing or how God has brought us through the healing process. And I'm your host, Camille R. Perry, and I'm honored, I'm humbled, and tremendously elated to have the one and only Dr. Jeannita Bussle, all the way from Dallas, Texas, I believe. And so she's with us on tonight. And our title today is literally her book, From Sorrow to Shero. And we're just going to just get started. Now, I have her bio, but I just want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Jeannita before we get too far in. Dr. Jeannita, I actually got a chance to just witness and see a little bit of her life, a snapshot of her life, while she posted via on social media, which brought us here. But more about her is that the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence defines psychological abuse as trauma to the victim caused by verbal abuse, acts, threats of acts, or coercive attacks. So in Sorrow to Shero, Dr. Jeannita Bussle gives an honest inside look inside of her experiences when the unimaginable happens and occurred in her life. And she shares how she was able to forgive and to heal. Additionally, Dr. Bussle discusses some hard life lessons that she learned along the way as a result of this tragedy. I recommend everyone to definitely, before the end of this night, I hope you download or purchase the book, and we'll make sure that you have that. But not only is she an author, but she is a public educator for over 15 years. Her expertise includes STEM education, socioeconomic learning, college and career readiness. Dr. Bussle's passion is to give others hope and empowerment by sharing her testimony. She believes the reason God allows us to experience obstacles is so that we might help others make it through. Her education includes a doctorate in education and educational leadership for K through 12, and a master's of education in school counseling from Dallas Baptist University. She also earned a Master of Arts in teaching secondary education from the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I believe she's a Detroit native. And a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the Tennessee State University. Dr. Bussle is the proud mom of two amazing children, and being a mother is her first priority and greatest accomplishment. So we can welcome Dr. Jeannita Bussle. Welcome. We are so happy.
Thank you so much, Camille. Let me tell you that first of all, sister, I appreciate you. I love what you're doing as well. You are so beautiful. You have a heart for the people. So I thank you and I salute you.
Thank you. To God be the glory. So we just gonna, on these folks' timelines, and watching YouTube Live, just gonna sprinkle some of this Black girl magic. Have an honest and very direct conversation. So, from Sorrow to Shero, tell us about that title. Where did that come from of that book?
So my book is actually a memoir. It pretty much highlights my marriage. Although I do kind of sprinkle a little bit of my childhood throughout the memoir, it surrounds my marriage, a tragedy that occurred back in 2017, and then the aftermath of that tragedy. So Sorrow to Shero, I got that title because it represents a woman going through a transformation. And for those who can see the cover of the book, there is actually two women, an image of two women on the cover of the book. Both of those are women of me. They're both of me. In that particular image, you can clearly see there's a widow there. And then that widow was in a dark place, and then she transformed. And on the other side of her, that light is pretty much holding her up from within. So that's where the title came from, Sorrow to Shero, and then the subtitle, Pain, Power, and Peace.
Yes. When I saw that photo, I was like, okay, with that fascinator, or something. Come on, marketing.
And let me just give a shout out to my longtime family photographer and friend, Naisha Lene Graves, because she's the person, she's here in Dallas, a local photographer who has been, grinding for years and years and years, worked with some of the best in the industry. And I just told her my idea, and she's the one. I have to give all the credit to her because she came up with that idea single-handedly.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. It's definitely a piece, and we'll share that before we conclude today. And so, so someone might be wondering, how did Camille stumble across Dr. Jeannita? And the first thing is, we are in a very social media friendly world.
Right.
And even though we oftentimes might not put all of our life on display, the portions that we do put on display can share a lot. Our lives are very multifaceted. So I actually saw your image underneath the Black Doctors hashtag that I follow.
Mm-hmm.
And you were wearing, the beautiful royal blue. And as a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, I was like, let me tell my sis, congratulations. And I'm like, let me see if she's my soror, because I had my message already prepared. And I'm looking on your page, and I'm seeing everything. I said, okay, there's no big low. She hasn't, no divine nine reference. No Greek them anywhere. But in your bio, you put, how you love yoga and you're a widow. And I was like, huh?
Right.
How are you a widow? And so, it's Sunday morning. I have time before I go to church, and I'm scrolling, and I see, and you speak so well about marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You speak so well about marriage. One of your posts that got me, you made it very clear. You said, women know your worth.
Right.
Never let a man tell you that marriage is just a piece of paper.
That's right.
And that, my parents are still married 40 years together.
Mm-hmm.
They've been married 40 years now, and they have their marriage ministry. And I believe that marriage matters.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard that, I heard the conviction.
Right.
In that.
Right.
And you begin to enumerate what marriage looks like from the after, when life ends,
mm-hmm.
for a spouse, what marriage means.
That's
and
right.
You said you don't have to worry about their phone number. You'll have their social security number. You won't worry. Honey, when I heard the snaps in between.
That's right.
Nothing could happen until your name was on the paper.
That's
no decisions could be made. And that's weighty. So let's just talk about marriage. Who was your husband? How did you all meet? Okay. Tell us your story.
Okay, so I'll just start at the very beginning. So in my bio, you mentioned that I attended Tennessee State University for my undergraduate studies. So shout out to all the HBCUs. I met my late husband, Reginald Bussle, at Tennessee State, where we were both sophomores. I knew of him my freshman year, but it was not until our sophomore year that I actually met him. He and I were friends for years before we actually made the decision to start dating. We had actually taken a trip, a group of us from college, to Las Vegas. And this was back in 2006. So we had remained friends from the year 2000 when we met until 2003. When I graduated, he took an extra year to graduate. And so just fast forward, making a long story short, we went on to this trip, a group of us from college. And it was at that time that I realized, okay, he kind of, this is what I want here. And I didn't
Right,
say
right.
anything because he was dating someone back here in Dallas. He was already here working as an engineer. And I was in Detroit where I had started my teaching career. So I had moved back home. And so fasting forward until 2007, that's when our relationship shifted. And we had a heart to heart conversation, as I talk about in the book. And at that point, there was just no turning back. I had started a master's program, I was finishing up. The following year, he proposed to me in front of my entire family. And shortly after, I was moving here to the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, where we ended up getting married shortly afterwards. We had two children along the way, a boy and a girl. But I'll just tell you that marriage definitely has its ups and its downs.
Yes.
There are things that I turned a blind eye to, and didn't and probably didn't want to see in my husband, because this was my friend that I had known for so many years, and he had seen me through so many other ups and downs.
Yeah.
But long story short, he definitely had what I believe is an undiagnosed mental illness. So fast forward, August of 2017, after a domestic dispute, my husband actually committed suicide during a police standoff. And so I was left alone to raise two children who at the time were 7 and 3 alone. And so just to kind of put that in perspective, the US Census Bureau says that the average age of widowhood is actually 59. And
59.
so I'm 36.
Yeah.
And so, that is the shocking piece. First of all, what he did was shocking, because anyone who knew him, looking from the outside in, as you mentioned, looking at pictures and so forth, you would never think that this could occur. But that's just a reminder that, people only want you to see what they want you to see. And so one of the things that I want your viewers to understand is that, never judge your life by what someone chooses, keyword chooses, to show you on social media, because they're not going to give you an accurate reflection of everything that's occurring in their life. And so, needless to say, this event actually hit the news. It was on the news, so my job was aware, my colleagues were aware, classmates became aware, because it was just a quick Google search, a Google search of his name, and it was just shocking. It just kind of rocked the community, not only where we live, but out where this event occurred in the Longview, Texas. Tyler, anyone who's familiar with East Texas, that's where it occurred. And just to highlight the mental abuse, or the psychological abuse, as I refer to it in the book, right before he actually pulled the trigger, he texted me twice and told me that it was my fault before he did it. And so again, that is something that I would not wish on my worst enemy. But, through it all, and I'm sure we'll get into this shortly, I am still grateful to God for all that, the good times that we were able to have. I refuse to speak negatively to him, or about him, to my children, because that's their father. They don't know what happened. They just know that daddy passed away. He was sick, and he's in heaven. And I believe that to be the absolute truth. He may not have had a physical illness, but he had a mental illness. And I believe that those two are one and the same. So here we are. And so as a result of this hitting the news, and I don't believe in family secrets, when the time is right, they will be made aware of what occurred, when I feel they're ready to handle that emotionally. But I wanted them to have my words regarding what happened long after I'm gone. I wanted them to have it in writing. I wanted them to hear from me. And I wanted his story and our story together as a family to be told accurately. I know that I am certainly not the only person that has dealt with this. And I am certainly, unfortunately, not the last person that will deal with this. And I'm not the only individual that has been in an abusive marriage.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me compose myself, because there's so many things. What I noticed about you, Dr. Bussle, is that you, before knowing what happened to your husband,
Mm-hmm.
every post that you made about your husband
Mm-hmm.
was all the affirmative.
Mm-hmm.
You admonished women to know their worth and making sure that that they understood the importance of marriage. That it's more than just a piece of paper.
Right.
You shared one of the posts. Your husband was looking at you in this doting way, and I believe you had the microphone in your hand. Maybe it was at an engagement party. I'm not sure.
That was actually our bridal shower.
Your bridal shower. Okay, I said I know it. I was like, because I have this type of mind where I can put the story together. I'm like, I'm building backlog, and I'm hearing music playing, just like as if I'm there. That's why I love reading the Bible, because I'm like, oh, it's so good the way I see it. And
Right.
as I'm looking at your picture, you said you're admonishing about having someone look at you in this way,
Mm-hmm.
that they love you in this way. But also you said, I thank you for the good that you showed me.
Right.
You mentioned about some of the friends that he told you to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the fake friends, rather. You mentioned, not to go different turns. Like, even though he was troubled
Mm-hmm.
and ailing,
Right.
he genuinely loved you.
He did. He did. Yes.
And I think that's something that I looked at. You're right. It was a Google search. After I saw the headstone picture, I was like, "Oh, no problem. She wants me to."
No, that's normal, and that's expected. That's expected. Totally
She
expected.
wants me to cross-reference. That's what this is. I'm an investigative journalist apparently, and so when I saw that, I didn't want to believe the headlines,
Right. Right.
because one, it didn't sound like something that would come from
Right.
what I've been seeing on social media in my 8 minutes of glancing.
Right.
As well as the fact of the matter that, oftentimes, whether we're the villain or the victim, society doesn't pin us well.
Right.
And so the headline, I just couldn't wrap my head around the headline.
Right.
Man standoff against Texas SWAT. Wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
But when I read the story of how, so it's okay. Help me to understand.
Okay.
My storyline that I put together is, you all had a domestic disturbance,
Mm-hmm.
but you called 911 because you felt that something wasn't right, and they were able to use OnStar to disable his vehicle,
That's right.
and that's how you all were able to get him at least settled and not highway on the road frantic. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct, pretty much. So without giving everything away, you're absolutely correct. That's what happened. He had already actually left the home. We had the domestic dispute that morning, and I kind of go through the events of the day in the book. He left the home, and I also left to take my children to the grocery store with me.
Mhm.
And that's when the text messages started coming through that were very bizarre. And I realized, okay, this is not normal. We would text all the time, but what he's saying is sent off red flags, pretty much about, me not being able to face you in this life and I'm like, okay, he's lost it. Okay. So of course I started trying to text him back and call him, and I'm getting sent a voicemail. And then of course, if you read the book, I don't want to give it away, but his mother actually calls me as well. And at that point, when I got a call from her, at that point, I'm like, okay, this is not just some sick joke. Because he knows that I'm upset and he's trying to, get me to come back. Like, this is real. Like, this is when I knew it just got real. And at that point, I lived just a short drive from this particular grocery store to my home. At that point, I run and check, okay, does he have his gun with him? And I realized it was gone. And normally, he would carry sometimes, he went to the gun range. So him actually having the gun was not the odd piece.
Right.
What was odd was the text messages that he sent prior, and also the fact that the gun was missing.
Yeah.
So those two together, that combination
Mhm.
is what prompted me to call the police. And and anyone who reads the story, that was a struggle for me
Yeah.
to actually call the police because of some things in my own background, growing up. And so, but I had to make, because growing up in Detroit, as you mentioned, I am a Detroit native. We didn't, growing up in the inner city, and just some things in my life personally with my family, we didn't trust the police.
Mhm.
And of course, this is the age of Black Lives Matter. It is now, and it was 3 years ago. And
Yes.
so I'm like, my husband is in this very expensive car.
Mhm.
He's 6'4". He's over 300 pounds. He has a loaded gun. Possibly, I don't know if he has alcohol or not in the truck. I later found out that he did.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is not going to turn out well. But I feel that I made the right decision because I was trying to save his life. So this was an effort to try to save his life.
Yes, I have the book, and as I was sharing with Dr. Bussle earlier, I'm this is going to be my nighttime read because I've already I said I want to hear from the author first in regards to just the meat, not the meat of the matter, but the what we don't see. What you might not have ever penned. One of the things that I noticed is that from just your descriptions of your chapter titles, you are pouring your heart. And not only do you yet cover your late husband, as you speak well of him, especially to his children, but even in this book,
Right.
you're not making him out to be the villain.
Right.
We do know that marriage is hard. We do know that
Mhm.
one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and I'm 36 years old, so come on, 84 babies, hey. Um, One of the things that I've learned in my adult life, when I first saw my parents growing up, I thought marriage meant you get along all the time,
Right.
you have the same friends, you there's no disagreements,
Mhm.
right? Everything is awesome, everything's fine.
Right.
And it wasn't because my parents, when they disagreed and different things, but they never got into heavy arguments, disputes. With my
Mhm.
mother never put my father out. We didn't have that turbulence in the home.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I got grown, moved out,
Mhm.
back home, where I was able to see like, oh wait a minute, like y'all both trip sometimes.
Right.
Oh,
Mhm.
we don't do everything right.
Right.
Oh, and
Right.
this is why you pray. And so you mentioned earlier that sometimes we omit to address something.
That's
What
right.
were some of the things that you, looking back with that 2020 hindsight vision, that could have helped you along the way?
So I think that, you know, all marriages are going to have ups and downs.
Hmm.
Okay. There's going to be disagreements, as you mentioned. But I
Hmm.
think it's very important to understand when this is just a normal argument in a marriage,
Hmm.
and also paying attention to the frequency. How
Okay.
often is this occurring? And then when it is occurring, how explosive is it? Okay.
Okay.
Is this something that, how well do you two communicate during and after a disagreement? And
Okay.
so I think for me, it was just turning a blind eye, just being in denial, saying, "Oh, this is normal." We're fussing and fighting. We're not fighting physically, but just in an argumentative sense.
Hmm.
And this is just normal. He gets into a disagreement with me, and he punches a hole in our wall, for
Hmm.
example. And me just saying, even though I'm startled, well, he was just upset, and then he would apologize or buy me a gift, and it was just a repetitive cycle, and I was just steadily being pulled back in with every "I'm sorry," with every give, with every "I won't do it again." I'm just finding myself in this cycle, and so if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have ended the marriage a lot sooner. Now, I can say that I don't have a regret about it because when this started occurring, my daughter wasn't born yet, so she may
Okay.
not be here. But looking back, there were definitely signs, and I have to take ownership of the fact that I did turn a blind eye.
Absolutely. And that's fair.
Mhm.
Oh man. Okay, because I had another thought.
And we
So
do that as women. You know, we,
yeah.
we do that as women. I know
Oh yeah.
so many women. I have friends that some are married and some are divorced, and we, especially the ones that are divorced, we talked about it. You know,
Mhm.
we compare notes. It's like, yeah, you know, you overlook this or you overlook
Mhm.
that. So there are some similarities.
When you mentioned cycles, I immediately heard the Jonathan McReynolds song "Cycles," right?
Okay.
Um, but one of the things that kind of helped me to understand a little bit more and identify my grandmother, my father's mother.
Okay.
She told me when I was 12 years old. She said, "I don't want Millie to live the way I had to live."
Mm.
And that word "had," that small three-letter word,
Right.
it struck a chord with me at 12.
Right.
That it didn't manifest till I was in my late 20s and 30s,
Mhm.
dealing with a situationship where the man dealt dealt the same as my grandfather did.
Mm.
And I had such a repulsive disdain at the time for my grandfather because you know how folks, some people don't know how to do better. They
That's right.
just don't. They just don't know how.
That's right.
And I was holding on to things that my grandfather did that I wasn't even alive to see.
Mm.
But because I felt the pain but not realizing I'm doing, if I settle in this situationship,
Right.
because that's really what it was. It wasn't a relationship. Just because you say you love me, you buy me things, doesn't mean that you do. Love is more than just buying me some clothes, taking me to some games, and throwing some money at. No, 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 no. Love is action,
That's
right?
right.
There's some things in there, and so it wasn't until I got to a place where I had to understand, if I really want to live a different life than what my grandmother felt that she had to, I
Mhm.
gotta let this go.
That's right.
And man, I like I said, I've never been married, but biblically, I guess you can say I've had a husband or two. But
It
regarding,
is a choice. It is a choice. And so
it
I totally understand. I totally understand what you're saying. And no, you may not have been married in terms of legally, but you do understand the struggle of cycles.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes, it is a huge, and we have to identify our own insecurities. It's oftentimes our own insecurities, our own hangups that causes us to give life to these bad cycles. You know,
Right.
but okay, so
And let me, if I can interject, and when you're talking about cycles, that's why for me, one of the things, one cycle that I really set out to break with my own children is that I never wanted to utter a bad word about their father to
yeah,
them. And so any, for all of those out there who are trying to co-parent, those single moms, for example, and that dad is, he's just working that nerve for whatever the reason, make sure, that you guard your children's heart,
yeah,
when it comes to their dads. Because I would have someone on the outside looking in would say, you have every reason. This is what happened. You can just tell them, tell them how you feel, and they'll have my words. However, I really made it a purpose in my heart to only speak life into them with regards to their dad, to talk about all the good in him. I mean, he was a director of engineering for a very large company by the age of 35 years old. And so I want them to remember him in a positive light. And so I think that is very important for women to do.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Words matter, and like you said, that's why you pinned your story, because
Right.
you want your children to have your words,
Right.
your heart,
Right.
and have an unadulterated understanding of what transpired between mother and father. In the end of the day, mom and dad loved.
That's right.
Mom and dad bore us and in love,
Right.
and it wasn't tumultuous for no reason or just for a
Mhm.
flippant or generational. It was a health issue. So
Right.
let's talk about mental health.
Sure. Sure.
Um, as a champion of that, but as you are leading the advocacy in your area, what are some things that you can maybe share with the audience on regarding mental health, or some cues, or you mentioned undiagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
Want to talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. So I believe, and again, I don't have proof, but only based on literature that I've read, that my husband was diagnosed. Well, he was undiagnosed. He had a mental illness that was undiagnosed. And I talk about it in the book. Rather, that was bipolar disorder, emotional disturbances. I believe that it was something there. And this is also information that I received from family and friends as I dug even deeper into his background. And
Yes.
I realized that, and this was actually admitted to me by a family member, that there were things in his childhood, which was troubled, by the way, growing up in Chicago, but there were things in his childhood that should have been addressed. So him punching the holes in the walls here with me in our marriage, he did that as a child. And I didn't know that. I didn't know about some of those instances. And so, mental health awareness, unfortunately, it kind of gets swept underneath the rug. I would say, when we have a cold, let one of us get COVID. We are running to the doctor to get
Yeah.
checked out. But for our mental health, not so much. It's go shake it off or suck it up, or, you'll be all right, just, pray about it. And I believe in prayer, but the Bible says that prayer without works is dead. And so it takes work to actually maintain your mental health. It is very, very crucial to
Yeah.
maintain and check and see about your mental health and whatever that looks like for you. It could be going to see a pastor, it could be a life coach, it could be an LPC, which stands for licensed professional counselor. But whatever that looks like for you, make sure that you are taking care of your mental and spiritual health the same as you would your physical well-being, because
Yes.
it is absolutely crucial. And I can tell you that psychological abuse can have damaging effects on a person. I
Yes.
mean, a lot of times in abuse, we tend to focus on the physical, which of course is traumatizing, but that psychological piece, being told before someone commits suicide that this is your fault, that can have lifelong damaging effects. And so I did go to grief counseling. So did my son, because he's the older of the two children. And so all of those things are important. And don't be ashamed to say, hey, I need help.
That's it. That's it. Yes. Raise your hand to draw the foul or call the timeout, whatever you need to do. I appreciate that. I do. And, we got folks chiming in, already giving out your book title.
Oh, thank you.
So when you mentioned about mental illness and things that you later found out that was in his childhood
Mhm.
with your two children, and
Right.
yes, your son has already went to counseling, are you noticing any traits or similarities in your children that you're addressing now?
At first I was concerned about my daughter, because when she would get angry and have temper tantrums, it would take a very long time to calm her down.
Mhm.
And she is a lot better now. But at first I was like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, what's happening? And then she's also a spitting image of her dad as well.
Okay.
She looks nothing like me. She looks exactly like Reggie. And so I was like, well, what's going on here? So I'm praying, laying hands on her at night, like, Lord, I'm not having this up in here. Okay.
Right. Right.
But so no, absolutely not. I don't receive that. They have not inherited any of those traits.
That's good.
And so no, all is well.
That's good. And I mean, that is something that we definitely pray over, pray for. But I wanted to ask, for anyone that might be wondering, but like you said, her tantrums. And
Mhm.
uh, my mom used to tell me all the time, uh, people do better when they can communicate.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
it wasn't, and I have godchildren who are now in their 20s, but when they were babies and they were nonverbal, it
Mhm.
was rough. It was very rough because they were not able to articulate their issues. And when I think about us as adults, when we barricade ourselves inwardly,
Right.
refusing to speak,
Right.
we brush off with the I don't knows and the dismissive conversation and rhetoric
Mm-hmm.
that it becomes, and then we do start acting out
Right. Right.
because the words are so much in us. And so I think that it is important for us to use our words. I'm as communicative as I am. I had to go to therapy to learn how to communicate about relationships.
Mm-hmm. Good for
I
you. Good for you.
I'm like, and I still go because
Good for you.
people always say, "Oh, Camille, you can talk about anything." I'm like, but when it came down to matters of Camille,
Mm-hmm.
no, we're not going to talk about that.
Right. Right.
But knowing that you need that healing. So let's talk about your healing.
Okay.
Um, as now a widow,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to take us into that night of what all transpired, without getting into the various details of it, but what was your journey process from August 19th,
Uh-huh.
2017,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm remembering right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It's
Uh,
August 15th. Uh-huh.
yes. What was that like from then to here, where I can see you just defending yourself, getting your doctorates? What was that?
So, well, let me address the doctorate first. So I had, because that was that I had started that process before
Okay.
the tragedy occurred. So I started my Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership K-12 with DBU, as you mentioned, in January of 2017. And so I started with a group of about 12 individuals. And so we became like this close-knit family, still are with many of them. And so, they kind of helped carry me through. There's a couple young ladies in particular, but all of them, I mean, my professors as well. And it's a Christian university. So, with their help, with the group that I started with, I was just able to just push right on through, even in the midst. So that's that. But I could tell you that at first it was very traumatizing.
Mhm.
It would have been traumatizing no matter what his cause of death was, whether it was a car crash or cancer or what have you. But the fact that it was this police standoff, and I'm on the phone with him off and on, so I hear the sirens, I hear the yelling. I was not on the phone with him at that exact moment that he pulled the trigger, but of course I know when it occurred because he texted me right before he did it. Anyone reading the book, you'll see that a couple of friends who had came over and sat with me as this was going on, we were following the story on our phones because the news had picked it up. And so how I found out that he had passed, I hit refresh on my phone, trying to get an update, and the story title changed and said suspect on I-20 standoff is dead. So I found out that my husband was dead online.
My
I
God.
will tell you that from that moment on, sadness was not my first emotion. I was extremely angry. I'll be honest. I was numb. I was in a state of shock. And even when reality hit me, because grief is different, it looks different for everyone. And again, I was livid. Okay, almost to the point of being belligerent. I mean, I was extremely angry with him and what had occurred because to me, I felt it was so uncalled for. When we could have just co-parented like two civilized adults.
Yeah.
But at first, I had nightmares. I had nightmares of hearing a singular gunshot go off. And so again, I knew that I had to get help, not only for myself, but again for my son who was 7, because he's asking, where's daddy? Now my daughter had just turned 3. So she doesn't remember as much, but my son, a lot of our counseling sessions were parent child. So we would have them together so that, he can hear what mommy has to say and I can hear what he has to say. And so it started there. My church was key. I do believe in the power of prayer, and I never really had the strongest relationship with God until I had to lean on him.
Yeah.
And so my foundation kind of kicked in, Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. I had to, because here I am. I'm like, I have these 2 children. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I work in education. Are we going to lose everything? What am I going to do now? And so anyone reading the book, you'll see for your readers that God, I mean, he showed up for us.
Yeah.
And so it was just through prayer and meditation that I'm here, because I believe that there could have been four caskets. When someone is mentally disturbed, if they don't care about their own life in that moment, they certainly don't care about yours or anyone else's. And so I do believe that God spared us, myself and my children. You hear about murder, suicide all the time. And so I believe that God was with us all along, and he certainly, certainly spared us so that we can live and give our testimony.
Wow. Yeah. There, I read a little pieces here and there. Um, One of the things that you mentioned in your, because you have a topic, it's actually chapter 9 regarding healing. Um, but the conversation in chapter 7 regarding the hard truth
Mhm.
with your father in law.
Mhm.
Um,
Everybody talks about that.
I, I mean, when I tell you, that's why I said I didn't get a chance to read, like, because I said, oh, no, no, I'm getting to, let me just stop. I want to talk to her organically. Like,
Mhm.
but that, how do you deal with, because now, mind you, well, just to the people, because you already lived this life, in 2015, you lost your father.
Right, right,
So the man that walked you down the aisle, undoubtedly,
right, right,
2 years prior to your husband who met you at the aisle,
right.
that's a huge life shifting.
It is. It was.
And then people and their flippant tongue.
Hmm. Oh yes. Oh yes. So with my father, I took that very, very hard, because my father is the only man that never broke my heart. I mean, actually, the only time he broke my heart was the day he passed. And so, but I believe that his death actually prepared me for what was to come 2 years later.
Okay.
I had actually, of course, I watched my mother go through the process of burying my father. They had been married 37 years, together 40.
Hmm.
And so, by me kind of seeing her go through, I kind of had an idea what to do. So I just wasn't kind of out to wander in the wilderness alone. But I had some help. I knew what to do because I had just experienced such a huge loss with my father. So you're absolutely correct. And then this tragedy unfolds. But my dad raised me to be tough. Um, and thank God he did, because for a weak-minded woman, um, I just don't know if the average woman would be able to handle this type of situation. Being told that this is all your fault before your husband, kind of let that sink in. Your husband commits suicide.
Yeah. I I have to ask for all my Detroit family and friends. Are you Cass Tech, Martin Luther King? What was your high school?
No, I'm KC. I'm a King Crusader.
Okay, because I'm like, because someone, someone will easily tell me, well, she went to Cass Tech, and someone,
My mother graduated from Cass, so yeah, we go back and forth all the time. Yes, I went to King.
yeah, so I'm like, let me just ask for all my
the
Detroit
only
folks.
the only way to go.
The
Let's
only
be clear.
okay. I yeah, I the Detroit love is so strong. My
Um,
girlfriend Sharon Woods Keith, she her whole family's from Detroit, and
okay.
we went down for her wedding
Uh-huh.
a few years ago. I'm like, when I was like Detroit in the house, I felt like I went to Cass Tech, and I was
A
like,
lot of people went to Cass. Yes, Cass
no,
is a huge school. I have to give credit where it's due. It's
yeah.
huge. We have a lot of successful people that have come out of Cass. So
Because I was sitting there like, Detroit seems amazing. Like, why, mom, dad, why did you have us in California? Let's but yes, I do believe Romans 8:28 is real.
okay,
I do believe when the writer Paul lets us know that all God causes all things to work together for our good.
that's right. That's right.
For them who love God and are called according to His purpose, there's a
Mhm.
condition in that. And what
Mhm.
you said that I always want to hit on because it's a relationship with the Lord.
That's right.
I think so many times people look at religion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And like, oh, well, we're religious. I
No,
tell people
preach.
all the time, I'm not religious, I'm relational.
That's right. That's good.
Religion would have me walk out the door
Mm-hmm.
because religious folks,
Yes, and it's unfortunate because people can be judgmental,
very.
and unfortunately, in the church,
Hmm.
when my story unfolded, sometimes people let their imaginations run wild,
Hmm.
and they don't know.
Hmm.
And it's like for me, I would rather you ask me than to speculate and spread rumors, because as we know, that's not Christ-like.
Hello.
So, but everyone, as my parents would say, Jeannita, everyone wasn't raised like you. And
That's
so we have to remember that even the church, the church is still composed of people, people with flaws and all.
lots of them, and that's I was watching an old Tyler Perry play on one of the little video apps, and it was I think it was Medea Gets a Job, and
Mhm.
you know how he would go into his monologues as
Right.
Medea character, and he was saying that's why when you go to church you shouldn't have your eyes on people, but have
That's,
your eyes on God
that's right.
because He's faithful. And I tried to repost it on Instagram, but the way Lionsgate is set up, they were like,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know. I'll just tell it on my show. But
Right.
it's the truth. And I can only imagine being a young widow with two children,
Mhm.
the conversations, the snickering, the whispers,
Mhm.
all through while you're trying to heal and make sense of your life for yourself,
Mhm.
to understand that it wasn't your fault. You did not do this, right?
Right.
You did not pull the trigger. You did not put the gun in his hand. Because I read the news report, and they said that before that happened, there was two shots that they believe went into the floorboard.
Mhm.
And now I'm surprised reading the news article
Mhm.
as a black man in Texas with
Right.
two SWAT teams.
And this was in the woods. I mean, this is
Yes,
not Dallas or San Antonio.
the
This was
sticks.
this was East Texas, and this is one time I have to be honest. I have to say this. The police got it right. This is that team that was out there, and I've had this conversation numerous times. It let me see that there are good police officers,
Yeah,
with integrity,
yeah.
and that have pride in their job, because his behavior, my late husband behavior, I mean, they would have had every reason
The reason to
to take him out on the spot because he had shot at them.
Mhm.
But I would, and anyone again reading the book, and I talk about this in there. This is one time that a police team, a police force, actually acted appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. I when I read that, I what made me put it together, because what I told you, I was on your page,
Mhm.
and I read your statements.
Right,
I saw his name, which led me to do the Google search.
right.
And one of the pictures, when you go to images, it's his work photo as him being a proud engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I was looking for a less melanated Reginald Bussle. I have
Melon was there. Melon was there and popping.
I was looking for something else to let me know that what I was reading was wrong, right?
Mhm.
And then cross reference again back to your page, and you mentioned when the police officer gave you blood stained wallet.
Right, right. So I had to collect his items before, as I stated, he's originally from Chicago, South Side. And so, one of the things he and I had never talked about where either of us would be buried. I mean, of course, this is something, while you're in your 30s, you don't
50 years
plan
later.
for that.
50 years later.
And so this is just a lesson that is never too early to plan because you just never know. But that's another conversation. But I made the decision, being his wife and next of kin, I made the decision to fly him back to Chicago. I felt like really in my heart of hearts, that was the right thing to do, was to have the services in his hometown rather than have them here in Texas, because I know his entire family,
Right.
they're all back there, and he has a lot of friends there as well, classmates and so forth. So yeah, so before his body was flown off, after I made that decision, I had to collect his items. And so I could see, on the cell phone covering, and the wallet and so forth, I can see my husband's blood there. So, and it was, like I said, it was just a total surreal moment. There's the whole experience. I would say that from the moment it happened until probably the funeral, just completely surreal.
Mhm. Yeah. Whew. That's heavy. I
Yeah,
mean, you live the life and you're yet living it and praise God that, like you said, there wasn't four caskets that
that's
had,
right. That's right.
you know, the world, we know the world that we live in is drastically wicked and getting worse by the day as scripture has to be fulfilled, but God's grace. And I'm gonna be honest with you, when I was reading that our news article, I was just like, I felt like there had to be an angel of the Lord around that vehicle, because
Mhm.
never have I ever seen something like that transpire
Mhm.
and it end a different way. Uh,
Right,
and so, like you said, it blessed you to have a reassurance in law enforcement,
right,
to
right.
have, and that's helping you heal from childhood
Mhm.
trauma. It's amazing how God gets in the midst of even in bad situations.
That's right. That's
God gets in
right.
the midst of bad. I'm not going to get all preachy or anything, but when
No, please.
I think about the three Hebrew boys, right?
Okay.
Because we had Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, and
Uh-huh.
the three Hebrew boys were thrown in the fiery furnace.
Okay.
None of them,
Uh-huh.
none of them were consumed. I
Right.
mean, Daniel laid his head on a lion and
Mm-hmm.
went to sleep. The three Hebrew boys were rejoicing in the midst of the fire
Mm-hmm.
and came out unsinged, didn't even smell like smoke. If no one looking at you would even know if they had not done the research, read the book, or
Right.
they
Right.
don't know your story.
Right.
They probably could have just stopped by your page and like, oh, so sad. I'm glad that she loves him and she's doing well with her children. Look at her. She's pursuing her education. Praise God.
Right.
Not
Right.
even
It's
knowing
that
the
simple.
weight, the
Yeah.
weight. And you, I mean, as stunning, you just you are and I saw the transition. There was some chopping of hair, there was branding of self. Like, I'm literally don't know you from a can of paint, but I was like, I see how sis went from cocoon to butterfly.
Oh, thank you.
Had that caterpillar moment, but went in that cocoon, and God brought her out as
Oh,
this beautiful butterfly,
no,
and
thank
you're
you.
able to tell your testimony. And I hope and pray I'm gonna place the information. You can also let folks know where they can find you, because
Okay.
this is something that needs to be shared. I would love to have you come and we're Be Healed 2021, whatever
Oh,
that.
sure. Let me know. I'll be there.
We're friends on Facebook, so
Uh-huh.
talk now. So you know me now, but
Yes.
there's the world needs to hear. There's some man or woman, and I always say this on the show to make sure people understand that this show is not woman based.
Right.
This Be Healed is for everyone. We've had
Right.
men and women on the show, but there might be a man dealing with something similar that you dealt with.
And that's what I was going to say. I didn't want to cut you off, but women can be abusers as well.
Oh yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
don't.
Us as women, our mouths can be vicious.
Hmm.
And so that is very important. And women can be violent. Let's just be honest. There are women, they'll run up on a man, as they say, and want to fight a man and all of that, and curse a man out, and take his manhood away from him. So it does go both ways.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
I I pray that someone on here tonight or might see the replay of this,
Mhm.
um, and even might just stumble across your book and
Mhm.
read it for themselves and say, you know what, I don't want that to be my portion.
That's
I
right.
pay attention to the signs. So, what I would like for you to do as we're getting ready to close,
Okay.
I would love for you to give some final words. I'm just going to pause out, and however you want to address the people on tonight, whatever the Lord gives you to say, and then also include where they can find your information, your book. And I'm just going to sit here and just let you have your way.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be brief. I would just say that, if you are married and you are in this situation that is hostile, volatile, and you see the signs, never ignore the red flags. That's first of all. For me, I did believe in for better or for worse. However, and this is for everybody, male or female, when the other person's worse is affecting your well being and safety, and especially if you have children, at that point, it's time to leave and walk away. Because, God did not die on the cross for any of us to be abused. God gives us choices, He gives us common sense, He gives us godly counsel. And I think we need to take advantage of those things that He gives us so that we can make informed and responsible decisions, especially when it comes to our safety. And so that's pretty much it. It's just to always trust God. He's always there. God is not a respecter of persons. He was certainly there for me and my children, and He will certainly be there for you in the midst of your own tragedies as well. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And where can they find? Where can they get this book from?
So my website, which is www .drjbussle.com, and Bustle is spelled Bussle. So again, that's drjbussle.com. I'm also on Instagram at dr.jbussle, and then on Facebook at dr.Jeannita Bussle.
Yes, and if they want to down, I purchased mine through Amazon for the Kindle.
Mhm.
But if you wanted to go directly to her website, please do
Yeah.
so. It's not only um, we're in the age where we need to support one another. Absolutely, that should be, it shouldn't even be an age. It should be just a mandate. I think that's what Christ told us to do in the first place. But I would just want to say thank you for accepting this random DM message
Thank you. Thank you.
weeks ago and agreeing to meet with us. God bless you. I thank you. I'm honored just for this time of fellowship. So, listeners of Be Healed Web Show, check out Dr. Jeannita Bussle. If you're hosting any type of event, if you need someone to talk to, you have a resource. She's been there, she's done that by the grace of God. God has brought her through and yet taking her through. So she has a strong testimony. And so thank you, Dr. Jeannita. That
Thank
is
you.
our time.
Thank
We
you.
love and appreciate all of you for tuning in. Folks are saying such good advice that was shared.
Oh, thank you.
You know, just you reinforced everything that what the vision of what God has given me for the show to be, and
Yeah,
that is sharing the healing journey and always giving Him the glory.
that's right.
So
That's
to
right.
God be the glory. We bless you all. We will see you all next week on Tuesday. Thank you. Same back time, same back channel, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 Central, 10 Eastern. Be blessed. God bless.
Thank you.